Hey everyone, I'm Samantha, this is Ida, and this is Sunny, and welcome to my channel. So I've been getting a lot of messages about people wondering how I've traveled a bunch with my dog. So I've traveled with her a lot in the US, and I've traveled with her to Europe. So today I decided I would discuss about how you can do that with your dog. Before considering traveling with your dog, it's important to consider how your dog will handle the trip. Do they handle trains well? Do they handle planes well? Do they handle cars well? You really want it to be stress-free for them, and I'm very fortunate that all my dogs are really good travelers. Part of traveling with your pet is obviously where you want to go. I'm going to be focusing more on international travel and flying to Europe particularly. So it's really important to consider some airlines will allow dogs on planes, but they may not allow dogs on planes if it's international, like they may not allow them to go from the US to Europe. So you really have to look into airlines and focus on which ones will allow you to do bring your dog. So small dogs that can fit in a bag usually are allowed on a lot of flights, but obviously there's size and weight restrictions depending on how big your dog is and the carrier size. So large dogs will need to travel either as checked baggage or as luggage, meaning that they have to go in cargo, which can be really nerve-wracking. So that's again why it's really important to make sure that your dog is able to handle that situation, because these flights can be really long, especially if you're going from the US to Europe. With the large dogs in cargo, some airlines may also require you to work with a pet travel agent to make sure that the process goes smoothly. Legitimate service dogs and emotional support animals are also allowed in cabin on flight, but usually there's still a weight restriction on it. So sometimes it's 65 pounds, sometimes it's 80 pounds. And the dog also needs to be able to fit in your foot space. So if it can't, you'll need to either buy another seat so they can use that foot space, or get a seat that has more foot space in general. It's also important to note that since emotional support animals are only recognized by the US, they're often only allowed on flights that are coming to or from the US besides domestic flights. For flying overseas, it's also important to consider that a lot of airlines have restrictions on the amount of time your dog can be in the plane. So sometimes it's 8 hours, sometimes it's 12 hours, meaning that if the flight's longer than 8 hours, that you can't have a dog. Sometimes that changes if your dog's in cargo, and that will be extended to 12 hours, but you do need to check with the airline. A lot of airlines also have restrictions on the breeds that can fly, so a lot of them won't allow snub-nosed breeds such as bulldogs or pugs, and some countries won't allow the import of certain breeds as well, so you have to consider that. While there are still a few countries that require quarantine upon arrival, a lot of them don't anymore as long as your dog meets certain health document checks as well as any possible permit status that's needed. The USDA website has a little section where you can say what country you're going to, and it will list the required documents you'll need to go there. Sometimes countries don't have that information and you'll need to reach out to the government directly. It's really, really critical that you have all the proper documents you needed to get into the country, because if you don't, it's possible your dog could be either sent back immediately, quarantined, or in worst case scenario, possibly euthanized upon arrival. Travel requirements really vary depending on what country you're going to, but I'm going to focus mostly on traveling to the European Union since that's where I have most of my experience. If you're traveling from the US to the European Union, you will need this 8-page USDA document that is signed and filled out by your veterinarian, and basically it says that your dog is microchipped, is up to date on its rabies vaccine, and it looks healthy upon examination. Then this document needs to be sent to a veterinary medical officer from the USDA to be authorized, and this all has to be done within 10 days of your travels to the European Union. However, when you are in the European Union, this document will last you for 4 months as long as the rabies vaccine is up to date. It's important to add that there are a few European Union countries which require tapeworm treatment. I'm not really sure on how that process works, so you'll need to check the USDA website depending on what country you're going to. And let me add that you also need to stay up to date on the regulations because they may slightly change and vary over time. Traveling back into the US is pretty easy because usually they just ask for the rabies vaccine certificate. For those of you traveling with your dog from the European Union to the US and then back to the European Union, they do allow for your pet passport as long as it meets all the certain requirements and is up to date. So now, traveling within the European Union with your dog. So the good thing is Europe is pretty dog friendly in general, and a lot of the trains allow your dog as long as they're either in a bag or you have a muzzle on them. They also have to be leashed, of course, if you do have them out. Traveling between the European Union countries, you do want to have your dog's documents with. Usually they don't ask for it, but of course you want to have it with just in case. Each country has variable amounts of dog friendliness. So for example, in Austria, Ida could come with me into restaurants. she could come with me into stores, but in Poland, she couldn't come with me to restaurants, so we had to sit on an outdoor patio with her. So it's also important to consider what countries you're traveling to and how dog friendly they are exactly. This leads to my next point of why do you want to travel internationally with your dog? Is it just for fun? Is it you're moving there? It's really important to consider how your dog will handle the trip. You also have to consider where you want to go and what you want to do. So if you're in a certain country that's not super dog friendly, you may not be able to go most places with your dog, meaning you'll have to leave it behind, which brings another question is a lot of hotels don't allow you to leave your dog in the room if you're not there. So there's a lot of aspects you need to consider when you're traveling with your dog because it may limit where you want to go and what you want to do. When I was in Poland, I was fortunate enough to stay with a friend in her apartment that was in the city. So we would leave Ida for a couple hours and just do some city exploring for a couple hours and then come back to take care of her. So it was really nice that I had that freedom a bit, but I also had to make sure my dog's needs were met because it's not fair to leave them extended hours. With my trip to Europe, while Austria was really dog friendly, a lot of the other countries didn't allow dogs in the buildings, which meant a lot of my trip was doing a lot of hiking and nature stuff, which I enjoyed, but that's why you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do when you're in Europe? So to reiterate, while traveling internationally with your dog can be a very rewarding experience, it's also quite difficult, can be expensive, and can be stressful. So it's really important to ask yourself why you want to do this trip and how your dog will handle it. Finally, I'm going to be listing some questions that are important to consider when you are traveling with your dog. Thank you guys for watching my video. Please like and subscribe and comment down below your thoughts.